Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining DynTek for today's webinar on managed security. My name is Brett Harmon, and I will help moderate today's presentation. During the presentation, all lines will remain muted. However, you can ask questions at any time by using the Q&A feature in your control panel, and we will address questions at the end of the presentation. In addition, today's presentation is being recorded, and we will send you a replay of the event as a reference or to share with your colleagues. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Joe Rubino, Senior Vice President, Steve Sanchez, Director of Sales and Microsoft Alliance Director, and Michael McManus, VP of Security, as our featured presenters. Joe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Brett. Good day, everyone. My name is Joe Rubino. I'm the Senior Vice President for Sales for DynTek in the U.S. and excited to be presenting this, what we do in the managed security space. What you're going to be hearing today, we're going to go through the slideshow. We've done a number of these webinars. Is take you through just a real brief intro to DynTek, who we are, what we're doing in the managed security space, where we started, and how we got to the point where we are today. I'll then turn it over to Steve Sanchez to talk about a strategic partnership that we have with Microsoft to offer managed security programs to our customers. Steve will take us through some background on that implementation. Then we'll turn it over to Mike McManus, which is really will give you lots of insight in how we operate and run those services in the latest generation of Security Operations Center that we employ today. And then we'll turn it back over to Steve at the end for some use cases and open up for any questions. So without further ado, I'll just jump right in here a little bit about who DynTek is. So DynTek today, we're real quick, we're a $125 million national systems integrator. We have a heavy presence in the Northeast, the Southeast, and as well as in the Southwest area of the United States. For years, we've been in the traditional security systems integration space by leveraging network infrastructure, lots of data center work, both in traditional virtualized servers and storage space, as well as hybrid environments. We have a unique relationship with Microsoft. We're directly managed by Microsoft and certified and a number of their architectures, and Steve's going to cover that in more detail later on. Of the 500,000 or so partners in North America, we're one of a handful that's directly managed by Microsoft in services implementation. And we for years, about a third of our business over the course of a number of years, a third of our business at DynTek has been security related products and services at the enterprise level, enterprise deployments, from advisory services to controls review to helping implement new technologies within organizations and doing enterprise rollouts. And we have a whole team of people that have been working in the enterprise space and security for years. So from our perspective, we do a lot in the Microsoft space with applications, both with traditional Microsoft Azure and SharePoint. Those are running in your virtualized data center. Talking to your network infrastructure, which really, for us, we really are a complete solution provider, really down to the endpoint. So whether it's really about the user experience, whether it's your customers, your constituents, or your end users, and so we have the ability to take the application down to the end user and then protect the organization, leveraging the best of breed security technologies. And over the course of the past few years, we've been doing 24/7, 365 monitoring of security infrastructure for customers, really focused in the government, education, and healthcare markets. And really from what we're seeing from our customers, we got into the security business about 4 years ago. We initially started as a point control monitoring service for IDS, for intrusion detection, which then led to intrusion prevention. We're monitoring some security infrastructure for a large government organization today, and as we endeavored into those early monitoring contracts, our discussions with the customers really, had fostered a lot of conversation about what customers were, some of the challenges they had to run managed security services on their own. the ability to try to build out their own system and build their own team and put together those programs in-house and then run them 24/7. It's a significant cost and investment for our customers and many entities to endeavor on. And then how do you leverage, how do you keep your system up to date? How do you keep track of the latest threats, and how do you leverage not only what you're seeing today, but we have the ability to really take a look across multiple customers to see trends amongst a large group of customers, and then take action on those and be proactive in your environment. And then there's always challenges around the regulatory requirements as people try to get in, as you try to stand up your environment, whether you have insurance regulatory requirements. There's insurance requirements that are now requiring from 24/7 requirements by compliance and insurance that require you to have these types of services. And a lot of the conversations really come around what are you doing for a security strategy for your organization? What are you doing to address your controls and analyze those controls, how they relate to your business, how they relate to the regulatory and compliance environments of how you operate. What are your insurance requirements? And because really today it's no longer a checkbox to get insurance to say you're doing these particular requirements by your insurance company. You have to demonstrate what you're doing. And really, I think the biggest question is what are you doing today to reduce your overall organizational risk? And so when we take a look at our customers and by the business, these are really some of the conversation points that we're having in the different markets, which are concerns for the customers and how do we address those. And we can talk to you today about how we address a lot of these different regulatory requirements, not only from the controls and how to implement them within your organization, but also how do we leverage this and take it and we monitor a lot of these regulatory requirements 24/7, 365. So that's a little bit of background. Before I'm going to turn it over to Steve Sanchez. So just to recap, we've been running our managed security services program now. We're in year 4. It evolved from an IPS IDS. We now do full-blown security infrastructure for organizations. We don't require you to buy any new products to run our services. We leverage all the telemetry from your security systems you have in place today, evaluate your overall security posture, and we make recommendations moving forward on how we can help strengthen your security in your organization. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Sanchez, who's going to cover the DynTek and Microsoft relationship. Steve?
Show. Great information. Want to talk a little bit to you guys about what our relationship is with Microsoft, why we're have made some decisions about partnering with Microsoft as we roll out our SOC. You'll look and see on this slide that you'll see there's some key differentiators with our Microsoft relationship. As Joe mentioned earlier, we are in the top 1% of within the Microsoft ecosystem. Kind of puts us at the head of the table as it pertains to partnering with Microsoft. Gives us a lot of insight and capabilities from a partnership perspective to work with them. Microsoft did release a new program about a year ago now called the Microsoft Intelligence Security Association. It is a badge that Microsoft, the MISA membership, Microsoft has released for partners who are differentiating their business value in the Microsoft security space. And DynTek was one of the early awardees of that banner. We wear that proudly. We are a Fast Track Ready partner. We are a 9-time gold competency partner, including all of the cloud competencies, the security competencies. This is all really very important to us as we begin the foundational understanding of why we've built our SOC around the Microsoft platform, but also because Microsoft is, the 800-pound gorilla. They are moving very fast into the security space. They've got tons of security solutions. Customers are looking for more and more support in the Microsoft security space, both in understanding the security posture increase as well as in managing and monitoring, which is what we're here to talk about today. So From that perspective, we really are a differentiator by both our Microsoft partnership as well as our 28-year history as a system integrator. So we understand both sides of that business, which really gives us a real unique capability to be able to service our customers. Next slide, Joe. So why Azure Sentinel? So Azure Sentinel is quickly becoming a standard for a lot of understanding as far as security solutions within this space. Forrester recognized this Azure Sentinel solution in late 2020 in their wave of the security released items. Gartner awarded 5 security solutions to Microsoft in the Magic Quadrant in 2021, and Sentinel is really the compilation of these solutions. Sentinel as itself is a solution inside of the Azure platform. It is not a product, unlike some of their subscription-based solutions. You would not necessarily go, I want to buy the SKU for Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel is a product that is based on consumption. There are 3 ways in which Microsoft prices the Azure Sentinel solution. It is based on data ingestion, data analytics. Those 2 typically go together, and then data retention. It is a cloud native SIM. It allows us as a managed service provider and you as a customer to provide you with a tenant that is yours. The data is owned and housed in your environment. So DynTek does not own or manage or is not the data custodian for any of your data. We use a tool called Azure Lighthouse to connect to your existing tenant. If you don't have a tenant, we can absolutely provide you with a tenant and build out a separate subscription for you so that you can deal with cost analysis around the entire Azure Sentinel solution and walk you through all of the governance tools for that piece. And help you with that. And then ultimately, DynTek provides additional value add in intellectual property around threat intelligence and around threat hunting that Mike is going to talk about in a little while. And that allows us to really reduce the white noise and false positives and give you guys a real actionable solution around how you go to market to deal with security solutions in a proactive way. Unlike the old reactive kind of let's roll back the VCR to a certain date and see what happened at that time, we're able to be more proactive in our approach to this. Joe, next slide. Oop, one more, Joe, I think. Sorry, that's a duplicate. There we go. Sentinel connectors. So let's talk real quick about Sentinel connectors. So Microsoft out of the box, this Azure Sentinel solution out of the box allows you to be able to connect the Microsoft Cloud Stack into the Sentinel solution. That is, the data can be ingested into Azure Sentinel and retained for up to 90 days in Azure Sentinel and at no cost. So that is one of the huge benefits with Microsoft having such a huge footprint in a lot of customers' environments and an up-and-coming security solution area on the Microsoft 365 E3, E5, G3, G5, A3, A5 solution set with all of the add-on security solutions that Microsoft's bringing to bear. The fact that they are able to provide you with a really powerful SIM-based solution, which we can help from a management and monitoring perspective and ingest the data from that tool set alone for free and retain it for 90 days for free. That's a very powerful sales process. On top of that, now you move to this connector capability. Microsoft has hundreds of connectors out of the box that give you the capability of being able to connect everything from what you see here on the screen to many other things. We just listed some of the more popular ones, obviously Cisco and Palo Alto and Citrix, and some of the unique ones like competitive cloud-based solutions like AWS or GCP, and large ERP solutions, SAP, Salesforce. So it's a really very powerful solution. We actually have customers who've had legacy IBM AS400 series solutions that they wanted to have monitored, and we've actually been able to connect those as well for customers. So it is very, very powerful from an out-of-the-box capability, from a Microsoft connector capability, and then from a customized connector capability. It gives you almost a limitless solution set. So, and Mike, I'm sure is going to talk about when we get to the technical side of this, some of the customized capabilities that allow for us to really do custom connections. I don't believe, and Mike will keep me honest on this later on, I don't believe we run into anything at this point that we haven't been able to provide a customer the solution to be able to connect into Azure Sentinel and correlate the data from all of those solutions in one cohesive environment. Next slide, Joe. So the DynTek difference, really quick, we've kind of touched on a few of these things, but it's really important to make sure that you understand as you're out there looking at different solutions. The DynTek SOC, our managed services, our solution here is wholly owned by DynTek. It is staffed by DynTek W2 employees. It is US based. The team that manage this, the security analysts that manage this are managed by Mike McManus and his team. And these guys are 24/7, 365, eyes on glass, watching customers' environments, and really experienced security analysts who are leveraging not only the tool set, the capabilities, all of the automation that's built into this, but as well as their knowledge and their continuous training in that space that gives them the unique capabilities of being able to help a customer from not only a reactive and responsive perspective in those areas, but also being able to help customers understand how they might be able to increase their security posture. It's a real big differentiator that DynTek likes to bring to bear is our customer service approach to helping customers not only understand what security incidents they need to pay attention to, but maybe those less critical or non-critical security incidents that we're going to point out for them that are going to give them the capability of understanding where they can increase their security posture and things that they can look at. And there's some use case scenarios we're going to talk about in a little while that'll show that. We leverage the latest security technology tool sets. Our guys are specifically trained and focused on this. We use machine learning to eliminate the white noise. We obviously have a shared knowledge across the entire spectrum. Again, very important to point this out. All the data lives in your tenant with secure access, and Mike's going to talk to you about the tremendous lengths that he and his team have gone through to ensure that we're at the highest levels of security when it comes to accessing customers' environment and dashboards. We do provide you with the same dashboard as our analysts are looking at. That's, again, a very big differentiator from a competitive comparison perspective. What you're looking at when you look at that dashboard is the same thing that our analysts are looking at. And there are no limitations. We talked about data sources that can be ingested. And lastly, a big differentiator, I've said it a couple times, but no cost for the data ingestion from any Microsoft Cloud solution. And the first 90 days of all retention for data is at no cost, although that is actually a very small cost even after the 90 days, but the first 90 days of retention is no cost. Next slide, which I believe is, I'm turning over to Mike at this point. Correct. Mike, I'm going to turn it over to Mike McManus, our VP of Cybersecurity. Mike?
Thanks, Steve. So we're going to essentially talk here about our approach, which is really end-to-end. So when we say we leverage the telemetry of existing investments in security, we mean that. If it's a firewall, a specific security appliance that maybe is not mainstream, maybe is customized, as long as that device can output syslog, we can bring it into Microsoft Sentinel and thus into our SOC. So really nothing is out of scope, whether it's a server or a appliance. If it can output syslog, we can ingest it, and our analysts can monitor that data for threats. So when it comes down to the MSSP piece, I mean, it's the engagement itself is pretty extensive. So it's everything from helping develop use cases to implementation, architecture, and design. And then we really transition into the managed detection and response, and then that iterative tuning that needs to happen in a SIM. So unlike many folks, we don't do tuning once a month or once a quarter. We do it daily, and we make sure that we're optimizing the tool sets that we use to detect threats in your environments on a regular basis. That even extends into our threat intelligence, which we'll talk about soon. Next slide, please. Okay, so as Steve had mentioned, and Joe had mentioned earlier in the call, our analysts work 24/7, 365. So that is eyes on glass, but more importantly, it's also things like threat hunting, which we do daily. And the entire process of seeing a threat or an alert, whether it's low or moderate or high, we take a look at it, we triage it, and if needs be, we then investigate that threat. So a lot of that is built on the data that's coming in, obviously, but also there's the threat intel platform that we use internally, which is internally curated threat intel, third party procured and validated threat intel, and then things like OSINT, obviously. We generally pull in anywhere from 2 to 3 million IOCs a day, and all of that's deduped and applied to all your data that we're ingesting and monitoring. The threat hunting piece, I'll speak briefly about. We perform that activity daily, like I mentioned, but that is a continuous process. So we have upwards of about 250 custom use case queries that we developed, and we apply that against all your data. Some of that is data source specific. Some is groups of data sources correlated with one another to essentially find certain patterns that we can pick out and further analyze in the log traffic. And then, of course, if something is found, we escalate to you. What's really important is we're not in a position that we say, hey, we see a threat. We think this is, potentially concerning to you. Here's the information. Have a great day. We don't do that. We work with you to help you remediate that threat. So we'll be with you every step of the way until that threat is taken care of. And that's a really important differentiator. Now, if you have certain EDR tools or EPP tools specifically, like Microsoft Windows Defender for Endpoint, or other third-party tools for that matter, we can actually take automated action with the built-in SOAR platform in Microsoft Sentinel. And we can do things like network contain that endpoint. So if it's available via the endpoint product, we can utilize the APIs inherent in those products and take action. Next slide, please. Okay, so another important point to make is our SOC was built from the ground up primarily for government customers, but that additional security extends to commercial customers as well. So our analysts work in a FedRAMP moderate GovCloud in Azure. We use secure remote desktops in that environment as well. Now, while we do use DynTek issued laptops, that laptop is for the sole purpose of connecting to GovCloud, to that virtual environment where our analysts perform their day-to-day. As Steve mentioned earlier, all customer data resides in the individual customer tenant. So we do not keep your data. We do not have custody over your data. So we're not a data custodian. And we believe firmly in it's your data, and it should reside in your Azure tenant. And if we're not cutting it and doing a great job for you, it's still your data, and you still have access to that data. And it's as simple as, removing the permissions within Azure for our SOC, and it's a very easy transition. Again, all our SOC reside in CONUS, spread out through the country, both in California, in the middle of the country, and in the East Coast. Next slide, please. Okay, so another thing that kind of stands out with our offering, and it's really a collaboration between Microsoft Azure Sentinel and our SOC team. So we're focused on data sources, as are most SOCs, but more importantly, we value assets themselves and users. So things like asset inventories for hardware and software, user and identity information, so things like Azure AD or AD on-prem, having that context both with identity and assets is very, very, very important for not just a SIEM, but for a SOC to function successfully. Not to mention vulnerability data as well, which is it's something that's very important that we shouldn't leave out. So given users, assets, and vulnerability data on top of the log sources, we can do things like prioritize certain events at a higher scale based on what asset it's on, who's the user, does that user have privileged access, what's the behavioral patterns of that user for that matter, and from a vulnerability data standpoint, is this a web server, an app server, a database server, or maybe some business utility server that's kind of open to the internet with public information? So all of these things play a role in how we prioritize our alerting. And it's very, very important data that sadly many people overlook, but we certainly do not. Next slide, please. Okay, and getting back to the threat intel, I mentioned we do curate third-party OSN and internally source IOCs. So one thing that we do though is we set all of our alerting thresholds based on what you would like. So the standard out of the box for us is 70% confidence level on all threat intel. So we only use validated and deduplicated and high confidence threat intelligence. When I say deduplicated, we actually go out and pull from third-party procured intel sources that have been pre-validated. We go out and pull every 4 hours, and we dedupe all of the data. We do that with our internal data too, and the OSINT data. So we correlate all that data together. We perform the deduplication, and we have to monitor these types of indicators. I'm sure, as everyone here knows, pretty continuously, because things like IP addresses and domains change, and they change rapidly. So we do that on purpose, obviously. And now maybe if you say, hey, we do have some customers who say, hey, we only want 100% validated threat intel. That's fine. We can do that too. But generally speaking, we like to play it safe and use the 70% rule. Additionally, we find that alerts that are derived from our threat intel data make up about 20 to 30% of the total alerting. At least that's what it was this past week. And what that means essentially is that if you're running a Palo Alto firewall, let's say, for example, and you're monitoring IPS data and wildfire data and firewall traffic data, perhaps the IPS on that Palo didn't pick up that particular threat, which happens. So we still see that data. We still see the traffic logs coming in. And for every log that you bring into our environment in Sentinel, we correlate all of our IOCs against that. So in some cases, our IOCs will flag on things that the customer's IPS or firewall or WAF has not seen. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is where I turn it back over to Steve. So thanks very much.
Great job, Mike. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about our support of our security operations center, what our MSSP support is. We really approach this from a concierge level program. We do monthly security reviews. And again, remember earlier I mentioned to you that the most important portion of our security operations center, obviously outside of being able to make sure that we're helping you protect your environment, 1A in that list is really our ability to provide customer service and really differentiate in our capability of helping customers understand how not only to protect their environment, but also how to increase their security posture and work with them to kind of leverage our expertise in that area to help them. So we do monthly security reviews and periodic assessments of the environment, helping customers, again, understand what alerts they've seen, how they can tweak and tune their environment to make their environment better. We do reviews on SOC and alignment with security services, whether that's compliance related, what have you. Periodic assessments on your current security posture and controls. Again, Mike and his team, analysts, as well as our customer experience management team are looking at your environment, looking at what your history has been, looking at not only your alerts and alarms, but potentially across the entire spectrum of our customer base, what that has looked like to help you see areas where we might be able to help you focus as you move forward. And again, aligning with industry regulatory and compliance requirements. Joe showed a great slide earlier that walks through all of the controls and industry standards from regulatory and compliance that we really try to look at, and maximizing the protection levels and evolving threats. This is really a very high touch offering that that we provide to our customers. It is very important to us because, again, you know, as a company, we are really customer service oriented company who's focused on our development of the relationship with the customer and helping those customers really understand how to make their entire environment better, and how we can help to do that. Next slide, Joe. So let's talk about a use case scenario. People are always asking for, like, help me understand what a typical use case scenario is. So we put together a little bit of a use case scenario. This particular customer has 2,200 users, 12 locations. They have a technology profile that includes a Microsoft 365 infrastructure, Cisco infrastructure and security with an umbrella deployment. They have Palo Alto networks, firewalls. They have Carbon Black at the endpoint, the Varonis solution deployed, Proofpoint gateways and email security solutions. They have an IBM AS400, Meraki wireless solution, and a mixture of on-prem and cloud-based infrastructure. So this is a customer profile that shows a customer who's kind of, again, has many investments in lots of great solutions, but really doesn't have a good way to correlate all the data together and really look at how that data is impacting their environment in a proactive way. Next slide, Joe. So their pain points, this particular company's pain points were they have compliance requirements, they got cybersecurity insurance requirements. We're hearing this one more and more from customers around how do I remediate the requirements for cybersecurity insurance, check those boxes on MFA and all kinds of other solutions that cybersecurity insurance are now leveraging customers with requirements on. They have complex security infrastructure. Again, go back to the first slide. Take a look at what they've got in their environment, the amount of locations they have. They've got a lot of dashboards and a lot of things to look at. They've got a reactive security response posture right now. It's very common for a lot of our customers who have a reactive approach to the way that they do things. They tend to be looking back at what happened after it happened to see what the tools they have were indicating at that time. I like to refer to that as like the DVR look back. They have a lack of staff and a lack of time. You know, we didn't touch on this today, but I've heard Joe mention many times the cost associated with being able to stand up your own 24/7, the cost not only from personnel, but from investment and time. There's, you know, just the basics of being able to do it. We hear more and more lack of staff, especially in public sector, lack of staff, lack of time, lack of ability to generate the expertise that's necessary to stay on top of the security requirements. They've got a complex, you know, again, ecosystem with supply chain requirements. They have no off-hours visibility. The customer, you know, 9 to 5 in their local time zone, maybe a little bit after and before that, but typically after hours, they're in a total reactive approach. They have budget constraints, and they're looking to try to maybe manage this from an operating income perspective and operating expense perspective. So next slide, Joe. So what did we do? We deployed a cloud. We presented this customer with our security operations, and how did we answer their questions? We deployed our SIM platform for them to collect and analyze security event data. That's again back to what we mentioned earlier: 24/7, 365, U.S.-based, DynTek-owned, W-2 employed, managed and monitored to consolidate and prioritize their alerts, to reduce the number of false positives and alert the customer to the true positives. Escalate incidents to the designated services contract. We work with them in an onboarding process to ensure that we have a very customized approach to how we're escalating those incidents to them, both maybe perhaps during business hours as well as off hours, and then even more intricately down to the level of kind of incident it may be. So critical incidents, maybe they go to a different level of person. When possible, we provide remediation recommendations. There's a lot of availability that we have both from our expertise as well as from the tool set to be able to provide customers with some remediation recommendations for them. 24/7, 365 telephone availability to assist with the forensic and malware analysis related to the identified security events. So again, we provided a total solution to the customer with one packaged price, with kind of a fixed approach to the way that they were going to be able to manage this solution, so they knew exactly what it was going to cost them for at least the 12 months from the date that they signed on. Next slide, Joe. So here's some use cases. I love these use cases. I hate to read to people, but there's really no other way for me to get these across to you, so I'll kind of read them really quickly. So use case 1, we received an alert for suspicious scripting activity on an endpoint. The customer was notified and the device was removed from the network. The investigation confirmed the activity was limited to the one endpoint and hadn't spread across the network to other devices. So I think this is a great scenario, again, where we're giving customers information that is critical to their environment. We're giving them not only here's the alert, here's the issue, but we're also helping them through the investigation to confirm the level or the depth of the issue, so that we can help the customer to kind of focus in on where they need to have their efforts focused and not necessarily be chasing rabbits that don't necessarily impact their environment if it was just one limited area. We saw a large number of failed logins on a server indicating a brute force attack. The server had port 22 exposed to the internet. We notified the customer before a breach occurred, and they closed the port on their firewall. We also advised the customer to set a lockout timer for failed login attempts. Great example here of something that we saw, which was a security incident and something that we wanted to point out for the customer. We brought it to them immediately. We showed them how to fix it, and then we made advice to them so that they could see how they might be able to eliminate the possibility of this happening or limit the window of opportunity for it to happen to them in this way. So again, alert, recommendation, helping the customer increase their security posture. We identified a change to a user's phone number for the, I love this one. For the multi-factor authentication preferences, the customer was alerted and the end user was contacted to confirm that the phone number updated was valid. Many times customers have these kinds of issues where they have an MFA deployed solution and they're concerned that somebody would have the capability of being able to change the authentication for the phone number, and that if the phone number were changed, then I could send the code to some other phone number, and therefore I would be able to get access to your MFA. I obviously have to know your username and password as well. But this was just an incident where obviously this is not something that's critical, but we were able to give this kind of information to the customer and let them know, hey, you should go make sure that this is accurate and that your user actually did make this change. Next slide, Joe. So SOC found that a new user account was created and then added to the local admin group through a script. This was followed by multiple failed login attempts with a new account until they successfully logged in. The audit logs were then cleared. We alerted the customer and confirmed that this was an administrator setting up a new server on the network. So this is an interesting one, right? We caught this as an alert and alarm. I actually know this customer. They were actually building a new server, but it did trigger the alerts and the alarms in the environment. This was actually being done in Azure at the time, and we were able to let them know this was going on. And again, it was good because the people we were alerting were not necessarily the people who were doing the infrastructure build of that server. So it gave them a really good checks and balances and really showcase the capability of the SOC. SOC identified outbound connections to an IP address that was flagged as being malicious. The customers identified, and the endpoint was investigated for potential infection as it looked to be command and control callback. So again, this is specific trigger mechanisms that allow us to be proactive in our approach to ensure that the customer is getting the best possible proactive response to their needs. End user reported a potential phishing email. Obviously, this one's super popular, right? In the age of ransomware, this is the way in the door. End user reported a potential phishing email and generated an alert within the SOC. The email was investigated and confirmed to be malicious. The customer was notified so that any additional recipients could have the email expunged from their mailboxes. So again, as an infrastructure partner, not necessarily just limited to our ability in Microsoft or limited to our ability in the SOC, we are able to also help customers elevate that response and help them to start to look at how do we remediate the issue. Alert was received for a distributed brute force attack on a single user account across multiple locations. We determined the device wasn't compromised and that the end user was traveling on a train with an app on their mobile device having an expired password cached. This was not sent to the customer as an alert to be investigated, but advised that they reach out to the end user to update their cached password. Again, we're working with customers from a customer service perspective to not only provide them with critical alerts, but provide them with advice on how they can help to manage the security posture in their environment. And that's really been a huge differentiator for us with customers. Next slide, Joe. So here's our last slide. I will tell you, we've got some great security assessments. Our Security Operations Center, our MSSP pricing model really gives you the capability of being able to help you understand not only what the cost is going to be for Sentinel, but also what the cost is going to be for our managed solution. We'd love to have a meeting with you and discuss those options with you so that you could understand what that pricing model looks like. Customers always want to understand that. It's really based on users in your environment, but there are some tools that we utilize to be able to calculate the cost of the Azure, as well as to be able to look at your environment. There's some worksheets that we fill out. We've got some, obviously, security consultations. We've got a proof of concepts and sizing engagements. That's what I'm referring to earlier. And then Microsoft, because of our partnership with Microsoft, does provide us with some funding engagements to help customers build out proof of concepts for Sentinel, showcase the capability of the Lighthouse connectors in our managed security solution in our SOC. So there's a full focused opportunity here for us to be able to help you guys. So no limit to the opportunity for us to be able to showcase this capability to you guys. Feel free to reach out to the people who you know at DynTek, marketing at DynTek, or any one of us who are on this call here today, Joe, Mike, Brett, myself, whoever can help you guys. We're happy to do that. Brett, I'll turn it over to you if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, Joe, and Michael. As a reminder, please use the Q&A or chat feature to ask any questions. We'll be sending you a recording of today's event, and you are welcome to ask any questions via email as well. And we do actually have a few questions that came in. The first one is there a way to prevent the syslog from being ingested or generated that we need to be concerned with or prevent?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
It says, is there a way to prevent the syslog from being ingested or generated that we need to be concerned with or prevent?
With the SIM, so the syslog, if I'm understanding the question correctly, with syslog, ingestion into the SIM occurs either one of two ways. It occurs either from an agent that you deploy on a server, for example, or in the case of an appliance, let's say, or a non-Windows endpoint, it would occur via a syslog server with a Azure collector agent installed. What that does is it builds essentially a point-to-point TLS 1.2 connection to your tenant in Azure, so between the syslog server and the tenant. So you would only send the syslog logs that you would want to ingest into Azure. If you want to go granular with that, yes, there are ways to, I guess, pre-parse that data prior to Azure ingestion. I hope that answers the question.
All right. And then the next question we have is, do you monitor Google Workspace for education?
Yes, we do. So we actually have a pretty significant number of customers in the K through 12 space, the education space. So absolutely, we do monitor Google Workspace. Yeah, it's actually something that Microsoft provides out of the box. It's a pretty quick and easy configuration. So yeah, absolutely.
All right. Our next one is, can you give examples of roles between DynTek and the MSP? What does the MSP do in you? And I realize this can be configured, but what do you suggest?
Okay, so I guess that depends on what you mean by roles between DynTek and the MSP. So we are the MSP. So we are that managed security provider in this role from a SOC perspective. In terms of roles between us and the customer, so as a MSP and your organization, again, that's managed through Lighthouse in this instance, and we would need delegated admin privileges for the MSP within your tenant. So essentially, we use Azure Lighthouse, and that's for Azure Lighthouse, by the way. So we use Azure Lighthouse to bridge the gap between our tenant in GovCloud and your tenant, and that's how we monitor your environment through that. So again, I hope I understood that correctly.
All right. And then our last one right now is what kind of lead time do you need for an engagement? For example, for an assessment or consultation?
So that's a really good question. I'll actually defer that one over to Joe. I think he may have some more up-to-date information on that than I would.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Really, from a time frame perspective, we're pretty quick. If you reach out to your sales representative here at DynTek or engage any one of us here, if you're new and not familiar with DynTek, our process is we get on the phone with you, discuss your particular situation, some of the equipment you have in place, answer any questions you have, and then the exercise and for us is to try to determine the log size you have, so we can give you an estimate on the Azure consumption, which you may already own, or for our Sentinel, Microsoft Sentinel. So you may own this as part of your existing license agreement, or DynTek has the ability to fulfill that capability as well. And then the other component is really we look at it from it's user based. So a lot of our management, you could have a whole ton of equipment in your security infrastructure, but we're really monitoring user behavior across your infrastructure. So we'll take a look at the number of users you have and add a little bit of a level of effort. And how we price it, we don't have any startup costs. We're a complete OpEx transaction for you. So it's the stand up, the configuration, the ongoing services to stand up your environment. It's a monthly or yearly recurring cost to the organization.
Great. And then actually we have another one that just came in and it says, do we offer offsite backup?
I'm going to defer to Steve Sanchez on that one.
Oh, offsite backup. So Azure is offsite backup, and you could use Azure. We have many customers who use Azure. And are we talking about offsite backup for the security logs? Are we talking about offsite backup for just generic offsite backup? The answer to both is we could do both, right? But what would the definition? We need to define what offsite backup is. Do they have some compliance requirements? We could do geo redundancy inside of Azure. We can get very complex in the way that we back up data in Azure, whether that's from a tertiary backup solution, whether we're going from your on-prem into the cloud from a replication perspective, or whether we're backing up logs. We could replicate those into the cloud from an offsite perspective, be able to provide that solution as well. Hopefully that answers your question.
All right. And then we actually have another one. It is, what type of insurance policy do we use? I believe that's what it says. Do you use?
And we have insurance for our SOC, and I'd have to figure out, they're pretty high dollar amounts. A lot of those insurance. If the question's on our insurance requirement, we have a number of policies in place, really as a result of some of our engagements with the government requirements. If there's specific interest, we can follow up after this call. If you're asking about your cybersecurity insurance and what you need, there's a number of companies that are out there, and we can help point you in the direction of one of those as well. And again, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but we can get a follow-up conversation.
What kind of insurance policy do we offer?
We don't really offer any insurance policy per se. We're not an insurance provider, so we typically work with the insurance providers. In the event that outside of our security operations center, we've worked with other insurance providers as a subcontract to help rebuild our breached infrastructure, and usually work with the incident response companies associated with the insurance companies.
All right, and another one came in. It says, what type of certification does your team, well, I don't have to see the whole question. What type of certification, Linda, do you know what that one says? Sorry. What type of certification do our teams have for this?
Well, we're all certifiable, that's for sure, and that's consistent. I guess I defer to Mike on the certification levels.
Yes. So that's a big question. So yeah, I mean the teams within DynTek are certified from everything from CISP, CISM, so ISC squared, ISACA, SANS. We have, I don't know how many CCIEs on staff, quite a few, to say the least, from Cisco. We have, I think, 9 gold certifications from Microsoft, Steve?
Correct.
And we have a number of staff that are highly certified with Microsoft. So yeah, it really just depends what you're talking about. If you're referring to regulatory certifications with regard to the SOC, we are actually in the process of going through SOC 2 Type 2 internally. However, we piggyback off of Microsoft's, obviously their advanced Azure space when it comes to their SOC 2 Type 2, their GovCloud, and Microsoft can provide a GovCloud all the way up to FedRAMP High, I believe. So we piggyback a lot in that space. We also offer a CAIQ if one's required. So yeah, there's quite a bit to unpack there, but hopefully that answers your question.
Great. Well, I think that is it. And so I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you for attending, and thank you, Joe, Steve, and Michael, for your presentation today.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Great questions.